What is up, everyone? It's Channing and Tori.
Hi,
Uh,
everybody.
welcome to Louisiana Homebuyer Podcast. First episode.
Number
Looking
one.
forward to it. Definitely looking forward to it. Man, we have some fun stuff to talk about today. Tori, how have you been?
I've been great. How are you?
I'm good. We're a little late. We had to wait on an appointment to get wrapped up, but that's just because we're always super busy helping people. Um, but yeah, what are we talking about today, Tori? I
We are
forgot.
talking about if now is a good time to buy a house. It's the burning question. Everybody wants to know, right? Or everybody thinks that they have 10 different answers to. Um,
Yeah,
so,
for sure. For sure. Yeah. Is it a good time to buy a house, right? How many times are we getting asked that question right now? All
I
the
mean,
time.
every day, every
All the
person
time.
who calls is wanting to know if it's a good time, or I heard it was a bad time, or I heard that this is going to be better. And there's just information flying from everywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the thing, right? Like everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got a reason why it's a great time, why it's a terrible time, why if you buy a house, your whole life will be ruined and uh, you know, everything terrible that can happen is going to happen if you buy a house, right? Like if you go watch the news or you get on YouTube or you browse TikTok or anything like that, like these are the opinions that you're going to come across. There's not really anything else that you're going to see. Like everybody's got an opinion, right? And so what we want to do in this episode is we want to just provide some clarity around the issue. And you're like, yeah, well, Channing, you're a mortgage broker, so we kind of feel like we know what you're going to say. You may not.
might
You may
not.
not. And if you didn't know, the news has something to sell you too, right? Fear and negativity sell clicks. Clicks sell advertising, and advertising is what keeps news organizations floating despite their irrelevance in 2023. So, let's talk about it, Tori. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Um, in fact, I just sent off a video about this. Another a real estate company asked me to weigh in on this, and so the elephant in the room is mortgage rates, right? And you see these daily. You see them go up. You see them go down. So if we're going to talk about pros and cons of the mortgage or buying a house in 2023 or early 2024 and whether or not it's a good idea or it's a good time, you can't have that discussion without talking about mortgage rates. And I would say the mortgage rates are a con, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a con to buying a house now in this market. But with any con, as you'll see as we unfold this episode, it is relative, right? Because sometimes I think we hyper focus on the rate. But anyway, so what's going on with rates? What are we seeing with rates?
Rates are fun. Still super volatile. They're going up, they're going down. I get these emails and updates from everybody that we work with in the market. Any investors send in updates, and I'll tell you one day it'll be, um, price improving, price improving, price improving. And that's awesome. Everybody gets super excited. And then the next day you come in, they post the initial rates for the next day, and they're 50 basis points higher. And then we get pricing worsened, pricing worsened, pricing worsened. So, and that's just from one day to the next. I can, we look at a 6.625 interest rate one day. The next day it could be 7.25, and vice
Yeah, we're
versa. One day I could price out something and it's in the sevens. The next day I'm like, oh look, I can get you something in the sixes, which is great. So
yeah.
they're pretty rough,
I would say
but
we're probably solidly in the sevens at this point over the
yeah,
last month
yeah.
or so.
Like for the most part, you're gonna see a seven.
Yeah.
Every now and then, we'll be able to find you something in the six range that doesn't have $8,000 in points attached.
Right.
But you know,
Jojo on LinkedIn says, it looks like she's probably a realtor. She says, yes, it is a good time to buy a home. Well, we'll talk about that. Jojo. Um, so yeah, rates are rates, man. And so the discussion is, you know, the thing that I dislike about the discussion around interest rates, to be honest with you, is that it becomes all about the interest rate, and that's only one factor, right? The true measure of whether or not rates matter is affordability. And so obviously when rates go up, affordability is affected. But at the same time, if you're paying $1,700 a month to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and your neighbor stays up till 2 a.m. above you, jumping up and down all night, then you can probably still buy a house, right? Like you can probably spend $1,700 and find yourself a house where you don't have crazy neighbors. Well, I can't say you won't have crazy neighbors, but at least they won't be banging on the roof above you at 2 a.m.
Yeah, they'll at least be banging on their own floors next
Yeah,
door,
yeah,
or
or
something
just pick
like
a
that
neighborhood where
instead.
they don't do that. But the point is that it's really about affordability, and so the rates are a con, but they're really like the only con right now. We'll talk about one other one, but when it comes to rates, just know that there's always truth in the middle um, of both extremes. And so, a lot in our industry are going to tell you rates don't matter. Your parents had a 20% interest rate when they bought a house. Well, yeah, but their house was $14,000, not $344,000. And so there's always truth in the middle, because it's also true that just because they're high doesn't mean you shouldn't buy. And so I would say the other con, and this is going to be super market specific because rate is really the main one, but this is going to be market specific. But the other con is inventory, right? And so in some markets, there is not a lot of inventory, even as rates increase, even as less people buy homes, which we're going to talk about is actually a pro. Um, there are inventory issues in some areas, and that can create problems. And why are we talking about this as a con? Well, it's because the low rates of 2020 and 2021 are keeping people from selling houses that may have otherwise moved up or sold their house. And so it creates a little bit of a pickle when it comes to inventory. Now, in our local market in Southwest Louisiana, it's a little slow, and there is inventory. But if you were to move into some places of New Orleans and even parts of Lafayette and different areas, you will see that there are some inventory issues. And so, is that pretty on par with what you've been seeing?
Yeah, definitely. Local clients that we have maybe need to take a little bit longer to find something, or they're finding something and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. Whereas I have clients in other places in the state, like you said, Lafayette, New Orleans, maybe, that they get pre-approved and bam, they find a house the next day. There's plenty to go around for everybody. Even other places in the state, like I've heard Shreveport, Bossier area, still super competitive. Not a ton of inventory out there.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on where you're at.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that too, and part of when we kind of give out our 5 tips plus a bonus tip if you stay to the end, on how to manage this, because it is something that can be managed. Because let's be honest, there are pros to the situation that we're in too. And remember, we're trying to answer the question: is now a good time to buy a house? So some of the pros of the current market is less competition.
Yeah.
So if you remember back 2021, I used to cringe when we would get someone, not because we didn't want to help them, but when we would get someone pre-approved in like Lafayette and they wanted to be in like Youngsville or something like that, it was like, oh no,
Hmm.
because it was a very difficult market for first time home buyers. Like they weren't going to get seller concessions. Most of them needed seller concessions. And even the ones that didn't, they were putting in offers with 40 other people, 20 other people. And so
Right.
that went on for a year or two. And there were pockets of New Orleans that was like that as well. And then there were pockets where that wasn't. And that did drive up the price of homes. So what's really great about this market is we have less competition, right? So you're not seeing 20 offers on the same house within 5 minutes of it, for the most part, right? Because inevitably someone will pop in here in a minute and be like, well, in my market, I listed a house 3 days ago and I've already got 40 offers or 40 offers. That's awesome. But that's not in
Congrats.
every market. That's not in every market. And there's always pockets, there's always exceptions to every rule. The main thing is that um, for the most part, we have less competition. And wouldn't you agree? Like, aren't you seeing like sellers are more willing because of the lower competition to give seller concessions or to come off of the purchase price?
Absolutely. So, like you talked about in 2020, 2021, it was one of those things that you either got no seller concessions, or maybe maximum would be maybe $5,000, which is helpful. It is. But nowadays, it's more likely that, you know, baseline is going to be that they're going to give you at least $4,000, $5,000. And I have some that are like, we'll offer full seller concessions, whatever the max we can give. We're willing to give the full 6% on an FHA loan or 6% on a USDA loan. So it is much easier. And even in those markets where we're seeing that more, you'll even have realtors that are like, we're going to put in an offer. What do they need? I was thinking about, you know, how much are they going to need? And you tell them, they're like, yeah, that should be doable, even if they need full seller concessions.
Yeah.
And it's that way because you don't, like you said, you don't have as much people shopping. Whenever rates are higher, you know, some people get scared. Some people just don't qualify anymore whenever they would have previously for various reasons, whether it be, you know, funds to close or debt to income, even. They're just not qualifying. And whenever you have that, you don't have all of those people out there that are ready to beat you out or say, hey, I don't need seller credits, so don't go with the offer that needs them.
Yeah, I think that people are starting to talk about the no competition, you know, as a feature of what's happening, and so I think that that's great. We're in no way trying to say that like this market, you know, because of rates is as good as the market 2 years ago. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that you're going to get what you look for. And so if you need to buy a house because you are a renter and it's time, or because you've relocated, or for whatever, you know, there's you divorce. I mean, there's endless possibilities of why people must buy a house in this season. It isn't all bad. Like there are silver linings. Now, one of the things that we need to be careful about is I want to talk about it. A lot of lenders, we see it all the time in groups and even like videos and stuff that I've watched. They're like, well, you know, just marry the house and date the rate, right? Marry the house and date the rate. And what are they saying? You know, other than alluding to adultery, I guess, is that, you know, keep the house. If you love the house, keep the house. And then eventually you can refinance the rate. We need to be real careful about how we communicate that, because none of us, not even the people who are experts at doing this, have any clue of what's going to happen, right? Like we can, of course we say we do, right? Because we have to give an answer, but like everyone's been wrong. Everyone's been wrong, right? To this point. Oh, Tori disappeared. So we really want to be careful with how we're communicating. Welcome back. We really want to be careful with how we're communicating that, but it is a reality that if rates were to come down, and I write that in big giant if rates are to come down and you do find a house that you love, refinancing is an option, right? As long as you pay your bill on time, you don't have anything catastrophic that happens to your credit. And then even if you have like FHA or something like that, they do like no credit pull sometimes, refinances with streamlines. But the point is, you do have options at lowering the rate when it comes to that. And we want to be careful not to promise that to people, right? And that's what I think a lot of lenders are doing. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. And I even have, that's the most common question, I would say, other than what are interest rates? I have, when are they going to come down? Do you think they're going to come down this year, next year? I heard so-and-so say they're going to come down in 3 months.
Everybody's got an opinion.
3 months, 2 weeks, and 6 days is when the interest rates are going to come down. And my thing is, we don't have a crystal ball. Wish I did. Would love to have one. That would be fantastic. It would make everybody's jobs and lives a whole lot easier. But we have no clue when they're going to come down. Now, if they do, and you know, they do, sure, refinance. Then you'll save some money. If anything, you'll just have more than you had before, and that's great. But if they don't, just make sure that you're purchasing a home that you are okay with the payment on that house for the entirety of the loan. You don't want to get into something thinking, oh, well, I'll just buy this house. It's over my budget for what I want to pay right now, but I'll be able to refinance next year or 2 years from now, and then I won't have to pay so much anymore. And that is just not a good,
that actually got people
not a good way to go about it.
Of trouble back in 08, 09 in 10 because they would do adjustable rate mortgages that had these extremely low payments for the first 6 months or the first year, and then the adjustable payment would kick in, and their rate would go up 2 or 3%, and they ended up getting foreclosed on because they couldn't afford it. And I'm not saying we're seeing that now for the most part. I'm just saying that the thing is the same. Like when you sell someone on moving forward with the loan because they'll refinance to 5% in 2 years, which you absolutely have no idea that that's possible, you're really messing with people's finances. And you even need to be careful. For a minute there, 2-1 buy downs and 3-2-1 buy downs were a hot topic and people were really interested in that. You even have to be careful in that. And for those of you that don't know, I've got a video on it, but it's basically where you use seller concessions to buy down your rate for the first 2 or 3 years, and it dramatically drops your payment. And the philosophy behind it is if rates drop in those 3 years, then you refinance and then you never have to pay. But again, if you could only afford it. Now, what's different, let me be clear, because we're going to have like the doomsday people that come on and say, this is 2008 all over again. No, that's not really true either. It's not like 08, because in 08 they would qualify you based on the lower payment. And so as long as you qualified based on the lower payment, you could get the mortgage. Now you have to qualify on what the actual payment is. It's just like a year or two of reprieve. But that really goes into some of the stuff that we've often talked about when it comes to buying a house. It's like your first step isn't to talk to a realtor or a lender. Your first step is to set your budget. Like that's got to be your first step, because the last thing you want to do is rely on me or Tori to tell you what you can afford. I got no idea what you spend your money on, right? Mm-hmm. And we see your bank statements, but that is not what we're looking for, right? So we can tell you what you're approved for, but only you and your family can know what is actually, doable for you. And so what happens though, right, to where you see this, is people fall in love with the house. They haven't thought about their budget. They haven't thought about a pre-approval. They haven't thought about any of these things. And they have to have this house. And I think you get yourself in trouble when you start shopping for houses before you've actually set a budget for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You find a house that you like, and we all do it. We're a very hopeful species. You find a house that you love, and now all of a sudden this is the one you have to have, and then you find out that the payment on it is going to be $500 more than you want it to be. That could be a stretch, but it's very possible. It happens all the time. Yep. Something I think is important is once you do find what budget you want, talking to your lender, not only about what it is, but finding out what price range that's going to put you in is important, which let's say this varies per house and per person, of course, because insurance is going to be the biggest thing there. That's going to change that monthly payment from one house that's $200,000 to the next house that's $200,000, but has a new roof and is brand new.
Right. Especially in South Louisiana.
Yeah, not in South Louisiana. It's awful. But that's going to be the thing. You find the house, then you're like, what is this going to run me? And it's way more expensive than what you thought it was going to be. Now you're upset. You're discouraged. You don't really want to buy a house anymore because you can't get that specific one. Right. And it's going to interrupt the goals that you would have set for yourself for trying to buy a house in the first place, where if you would have just taken a step back, talked to somebody first, figured out your budget, and then found out what that's actually going to look like, you could have looked at another range, probably found something that you also liked a lot, and gone about it that way.
Well, and it's all relative too, right? Because let's say that you're already a homeowner and you already have a house and you got one of these 3% rates. Well, listen, man, chances are you're probably going to hold on to your house for a little while. Yeah. Right? Like there's not much, unless you get a divorce, you have to relocate, or there's some other urgent pressing issue that requires you to sell and move. I'm just being honest. Like you're probably holding on for a while. Right. But if you're a renter and you're already paying rent and you don't own, this is a fantastic time to buy, as long as you can afford whatever you're pulling the trigger on. And that's what we're talking about here is, so at the end of the day, is it a good time to buy or not is 100% relative to your situation. And so for anyone to step in and say, it is not a good time for you to buy a house, or it is a good time for you to buy a house, they don't know that. Unless it's your mom. right? Like, and they know, and probably not even then, because goodness,
No,
we get all types of terrible advice from family members. Uncle Joe, who never bought a house, is telling you don't buy one. No offense, Uncle Joe, but just chill for a minute, man. But it's all about your personal situation, and I think that's just what needs to be communicated. And we lose sight of that because we're in a profession where we make money if we sell a mortgage or if we sell a house. And so we have to be very careful not to allow our own wishes and needs to cloud what's best for our clients. And we have had many conversations where we've said, I just don't think it makes a ton of sense for you to buy a house right now.
Yeah, right now you should probably wait. And we always don't say just now's not a good time. We put a game plan in place. We figure out how we can make it a good time down the road.
Because here's the thing. When you say I'm going to wait with no plan, nothing else is going to change. And now we're really getting down the soapbox here, but you got to have a plan, right? And so we get people that reach out to us all the time and they're like, hey, I'm not quite ready yet. And we're like, just jump on a call with us, right?
Yeah.
Just jump on a phone call. I promise you, I'm not going to convince you into selling your kidney to me, for $300. we just want to help, right? We just want to help. And people have a lot of bad experiences with salespeople in a lot of different industries. I won't single anyone out. But it really is for us. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for us. Like, let us learn what you have going on, what's on your brain, what are you trying to do, what's your situation, and let us help craft a plan. And sometimes that plan is, hey, you didn't think you were ready, but you are. And then you have people like, Miss Tanya and her husband who waited 27 years to buy a house, and they buy one in what everyone's calling the worst housing market in the last 20 years, right? You have people that like Miss Carrie who just closed, who were about to give up because they didn't have lenders. She couldn't find a lender to answer her question that she trusted. And then she finds us on Google, right? And I'm not trying to be super self-promoting. I'm just saying, like, people are buying houses every single day. First-time home buyers are buying houses every single day in this market. If you need to buy a house, if you're paying rent and you're tired of doing that, whatever the situation is, we can help you put a plan together, whether that's let's start shopping today or, hey, do this over the next 3 months and let's come back to it, right?
Yeah.
We can do that. And so there's less competition. The other thing real quick, that's kind of a pro with that is that a lot of lenders, including us, are offering discounts, right? Because the market is slow and we're like, hey, let's just do what it takes to get the deal done, right? Like if we can control it, we will help. We will do whatever it takes to get the deal done. And so there's a lot of lenders out there that are willing to do that. Not all of the ones that do it offer great service. So you kind of got to know that going into it. Like if you're getting this crazy deal, like expect it to feel like a tooth extraction with no Novocaine. But, some people, that's okay with them. They're cool with a little pain for the next 30 days, to get a crazy deal. And then there's others that provide good deals and then still provide good service by not forcing you to talk to a chat bot or, whatever, just to answer mortgage questions. So, okay. I don't know if we've answered the question. We're going to get into the tips here in a minute, but I think the answer to is now a good time to buy a house. It's maybe.
Subjective. Yeah.
It's subjective, right?
Very subjective.
But here's the kicker. That was true in 2020 and 2021 too. Because the answer to this question has nothing to do with the market.
Mm-mm.
It has to do with your personal situation. And so in 2020, even with rates at 3%, 2.75%, it was still not a great time for some people to buy a house.
There were still people who didn't qualify to buy a house at 2%.
Or that did, and it just didn't make sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about the 5 tips to buy a house in any market. And this will feed into that. The first tip is you're buying a house for the long term. Right. And so even in 2020 and 2021, if you were just going to be living in an area for a year or two, it probably didn't make sense to buy a house. It probably doesn't make sense to pay closing costs and down payments and all these different things if you're just going to buy a house and stay in it for a year. Now, of course, like I've said before, there are exceptions to every rule. Maybe you worked PRN work and you were going to the hospital and you could buy a townhouse or something that you could easily rent out after you've moved on. Great. If that's what you want to do, you want to be in the rental game, then great. But the reality is you're buying a house for the long term. Why do I bring that up? Why is that my first tip? Because a lot of the additional fear that's being pushed in the market right now about buying a house is, well, what if the housing market collapse? Well, listen, you have a tangible thing when you buy a house. So if you hold on to it long enough, it will appreciate in value. That's what it's done for all the time. So unless the trend reverses itself for all time, right? Even after 08, houses lost value and then their values went back up as the market recovered. So if you're going to stay in a house long enough, who cares? Like if you're buying a house and you're not ready to stay in it for 5 years, probably don't buy anyways.
Mm-mm.
You know, unless you're going to buy something specifically that can be rented out, like we just talked about. You know, if you're not going to stick around for 5 years, who cares?
Yeah.
Like
Why
don't buy.
spend the money on closing costs, down payment, and then be responsible for repairs and updates or something breaks or anything like that just for 5 years? It doesn't make sense.
And I get super frustrated because it's like the financial gurus who have like millions of dollars and they're accumulating rental properties and stuff, the advice that they're giving to other investors gets trickled down to first-time home buyers. And it's like, none of this stuff matters if you're still renting.
Mm-mm.
Like if you're still renting, stop doing that. If you want to, right? Like if obviously if you're listening to this or you're interested in this topic, there's a part of you that wants to buy a house. If that's something you want to do and you're still renting, then all of that crap about like, you know, trying to time the market, that doesn't matter. Dude, you're paying $1,600 a month to another person. Take that same $1,600 a month and pay it to yourself in the form of a mortgage, build equity over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And you have, I don't want to call a house an asset because it does cost money, but you have a tangible thing that can appreciate, right? Even though it does cost you money. And the statistics are out there. Go Google them. The wealth of the average homeowner versus the one who doesn't, right? It's insanely more because basically a mortgage is a forced savings plan. That's what it is. Again, as long as houses continue to appreciate, which they have done, maybe not in year over year times for the all time, but you take 10 years and there's probably not a single period of time where over 10 years houses went down in value, right?
Yeah,
you have these in 08, you had this big drop, but then they slowly started coming back up. So that's tip number 1. Do you have tip number 2, Tori?
I do. It is, don't buy the most expensive house. Don't buy the most expensive house. You don't want to go and get your budget and go for the very tip top of it. That's going to put you uncomfortable, or you know, it's going to end up being more than you want it to be in the long run. You want to get something and go just a touch under. You don't have to go too far, just a little bit.
And also it's not buying the most expensive house in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
that's another important factor.
Oh yeah, don't keep up with the Joneses. You don't have to. Nobody has
because
to.
you know, there may be a house that was remodeled and an investor came in and now it's at the tippy top of the, you want to be in the mid range of that neighborhood, right? You don't want to be in the most expensive house, and then if the market did crash or something, then you're kind of stuck because you bought at the top end of the price range. You want to be below that, and a lot of times an easy way to do that is to buy the house that hasn't been updated, right? To buy the house that has maybe some cosmetic things that most people can't get past. I'm not talking about
the
like
thing is you
roof.
buy something that has some cosmetic stuff that you don't like, for the most part, it's going to be another thing that's like, okay, somebody's going to come in and say no because I did this and it was completely different. For the most part, the stuff that is cosmetic that can be updated, new paint, taking the wallpaper off the wall, something like that, way cheaper to buy the house, do it yourself. Because if somebody else comes in and does it and updates it, they're going to not just charge the little bit of money that it costs to do something. They're going to up the price on the house by a couple $1,000s because now it's renovated or updated or something like that. It's just much cheaper to do it yourself for the most part.
And if that's what you want, just know that you're going to pay a premium for that. Right? Like everybody wants the new house or the remodeled farmhouse or, you know, whatever trend, insert popular trend here. But the reality is there are deals to be found. I see them all the time when you look at a house that's been on the market for 12 months, right? And you go, they probably willing to make a deal on that, or maybe it's been on the market because they're not willing to make a deal. But a lot of times they are, and so not going for the top end of the price range in the neighborhood is key, because it will help to protect you in the event that things do plummet and things do crash. At least in my opinion. These are all my opinions, by the way. So at the end of the day, do you, man? But yeah. So tip number 3 goes right in line, kind of what Tori was just talking about, and that's buying under your budget, right? Like you were saying, you don't want to buy at the top end of your budget, because oftentimes what happens is we have this, like, we create a budget and it's like the perfect world, right? Like, it doesn't include getting a flat tire, it doesn't include a kid getting sick, it doesn't include insert random life event here. And when we pull the trigger on something at the top of our of our budget, we become what's called house poor. And that's where we can't do anything. All we do is live in our house. We work to pay our house note. We get no joy outside of our house note. And yeah, don't do that, man. Don't do that.
No,
That's tip
I
number
mean,
3.
just think about how often it happens. Take 2020. We're all working. We're having a good time in the beginning of 2020, and then bam, there's a pandemic. Everybody go home. Don't work anymore. Sorry, over with. And now you're stuck with this super large note that you couldn't save anything extra because you're paying the top of your note. So now you have no savings to fall back on. And even something not that dramatic where you're sent home for 2 months or however long, you get sick, you miss a week of work.
Yep.
You're not salary, you're an hourly employee, you're not getting paid. You don't have any PTO saved up, whatever the case is. And now you're out of income for a week. That throws off your entire budget for the month. And now you still got to pay that note.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's really key. And because there's all these like unexpected events, and but on the flip side of that too, like at any point, even if you're a renter, if you lose your job, you're going to probably lose your house, right?
Yeah, you're in a bind.
So there's a balance that we have to strike here with, at least if you own the house, you have some options potentially. You could rent it out while you don't have a job, so that it doesn't get foreclosed on. Anyways, there's other options. We have to keep an open mind, but buying under your budget will help. And then Tori, tip number 4, if you want to jump into that one, kind of goes right into that on how to find stuff that's under your budget. Or not at the top.
That's going to be flexible on your location and on your options. So a lot of times you're going to get an idea of exactly what and where, and down to the T of what you want. Give a little, bend a little. You may be able to find exactly what you want that way, and that's great. If you do, then congratulations. That's awesome. Very happy for you. But you need to be able to maybe go a little out. If you want to go inside the city, maybe go 10 minutes out. 10 minutes away from where you want it to be. You're in a different range. Houses are a little bit lower because they're not right next door to the new whatever it is, trampoline park or whatever amenities are going to be out there. You're not right next door to all the new stuff. It's a little bit cheaper. Because guess what? Right. Other people are trying to do the same thing, buying right inside where they are.
I mean, sometimes a 15-minute drive can save you $50,000.
Yeah.
And like literally, I see this happen with new builds all the time, like new constructions. You'll have one builder, and the same house in one part of town is $350, and in a different part of town it's $250, and it's the same house.
Mm-hmm.
It is the same house, and so. Being flexible on location is key. Being flexible on options also key, and that kind of goes back to, maybe the house is a little dated, maybe it has some paint that you don't like, maybe it's got some cabinets that need painting. Like whatever the case is, I'm not trying to turn y'all into like fixer-upper people if that's not what you are. I'm just saying that if it's just paint, if it's just flooring, those aren't the end of the world. And if you can live with it a while you save the money, or maybe you save the money because of the lower down payment you put down, to get someone in there and change those things, it can be very rewarding, to the point that you might have one of the better homes in the neighborhood when it's all said and done. And you acquired it at a cheaper cost. And so that's what we see that a lot, but also if we were to invite like 5 realtors on the podcast, maybe we'll do this someday, and we were to ask them how many times does a client buy the house that they say, it has to have all these things, how many times do they actually buy that house? The answer
I'd
is
love to hear
probably
the
like
statistic on
1%.
that.
Yeah, it's probably like 1%. Because the reality is we have to be flexible, right? The perfect house doesn't exist. And there's a trap too that I want my first time home buyers and my renters that are listening to this, because that's really who this podcast is for, that are listening to this, to understand is like, your first home doesn't have to be your forever home.
Mm-mm.
It can just be your first home. And there is no shame in $150,000 house in the country. There's not, man. Like you're changing your story, right?
It's
You're
yours.
building
You
wealth
get
for
to
your
have it.
family, and you're creating a legacy. And whether it's your forever home or whether it's your home for the next 5 years, there's no shame in that. And I think that we just all need to take a second, right? Because of Instagram and Facebook and TikTok or whatever social media platform exists, where we see, oh, well, so and so just has this beautiful house that they just bought, and yada yada yada. Like, do what's right for you, And I mean, the reality is, if you're paying $600 a month in rent and that's your budget, you probably can't buy, right? Like, not in this market.
Keep your $600 a month in rent, because honestly, that's even hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean, rent's going up too. And so if you look at the cost of a 2-bedroom apartment in any major city in Louisiana, you're talking $1,500, $1,600 a month. You can buy a house for that.
Yeah.
You can buy a house for that. And so, okay, the final tip, and then I have one bonus tip. It's not really a tip, it's more an opinion, but the final tip is trust but verify. Trust but verify. And Tori and I were just talking about this morning in a meeting. Words are just that. It's just words, right? And so we're seeing this a lot right now, where people are promising home buyers a lot, right? Oh, well, your payment will only be this. Oh, well, your closing costs will only be this, right? And we're seeing this in relation to like clients that we're working with, who then have solicitations from other lender, or maybe they wanted to shop us, which we always encourage people to do. We just ask that we have a chance to compete back. But what we're seeing is they're like, oh, well, my closing costs with them were $3,000 more. And typically one of two things happens when we reach back out to them and they tell us that, and we say, hey, okay, cool. Will you send that over to me so we can see if we can compare it? One of two things happens. One, they don't have anything written down to give us because the lender just verbally promised it to them. They didn't give them, they didn't do a full pre-approval, or maybe they did, but they haven't provided them anything written. That's a terrible practice. And if your lender's doing that, please run away. Like, that's not a good practice. The second thing that happens is we get it, and they put that the insurance is $100 a month in New Orleans, which is never going to happen. That didn't even happen 2 years ago. So, and then what that does is that shows that, maybe their payment's $200 cheaper with this lender and their closing costs are $3,000 less, but it's not real, right? Because they play with the numbers. And so, one of the things, Tori, and you can maybe talk about this a little bit, we try to do is, we don't talk trash.
No.
But at the same time, because a lot of lenders use this strategy of like, oh, well, I can do this, and they're just trying to do this. Well, we're just trying to present facts. Okay. And the facts are that about the only place that I know of that you can get $100 a month insurance policy is like Bossier City. And even then it's more difficult, right? If someone's doing that, I don't know. I just don't think I don't think it's a good sign. I don't think it's a good sign that they're not taking their job seriously. And what does that do to the emotional state of the client?
Well, yeah, because whenever you have somebody telling you, oh, I can do this, I can get you no down payment, or on the flip side, I can get your closing costs like this, your monthly payment at this, and then you find a house, go under contract, and you're thinking that this is going to be your money, this is what you're doing, this is how much it's going to cost, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, now you're 2 weeks from closing. By the way, your homeowner's insurance policy, yeah, it's not $1,200 a year, it's $3,500 a year. Oh yeah, and you're in a flood zone. So there's that too. And now your monthly payment has gone up $200 or more, and your closing costs have gone up, like you said, $3,000. And now it's either find out how to be okay with affording it and how to come up with the extra money. Let's say like what you had for closing was the max that you had. You have nothing beyond that. Now you have to figure out how to come up with more, or you lose your house.
Yep. She's gone again. Yeah, and so what she's saying is maybe put it on Do Not Disturb so it won't do that anymore.
I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I don't know what just happened. I even had turned off the stuff on my computer. I don't know.
We'll edit this out. Yeah, go
what
ahead.
I was saying is even more, even beyond the trying to figure out how to afford it or trying to figure out to come up with money because somebody's going to say, oh, you'll just figure it out, or you'll get you'll get a gift from somebody or something. It's not always that easy. But also it could be the difference in being able to qualify to purchase the house or not.
And it oftentimes is.
Yeah, like if your payment rate is $200, maybe you don't have enough room in your debt to income ratio to even go that high. There's a reason why we do things a little bit differently, why we do things so thoroughly. We're going to get every document, we're going to go over every line that we possibly can in order to make sure that we're giving you the most accurate estimate that we possibly can. Because why do you want to get your hopes up and then not be able to do something, and now you're destroyed emotionally? It's just,
I mean, there's already going to be enough stuff that comes up that's unexpected, right? Mm-hmm. That happens. That's part of the process. So why let that happen with things that we can control when we're already going to be presented with things that we can't? Whether that's the home doesn't appraise for as much, or it needs a repair, or like, right? It doesn't happen on every deal, but there are things that are going to come up naturally. Let's control what we can control. And so, you know, this idea that I can go online and I can type in a website and I can click 4 buttons and then I'm pre-approved, it's bullcrap, man. Like that doesn't happen. Mortgages don't take place without conversations, period. Mortgages can't get approved without documents, period. And the faster and the quicker that those are provided, because I know a lot of people don't like to do that, right? They I don't know what it is. I guess it's the big budget of the mortgage company that shall not be named that like convinces people that this is doable. But guys, it's not. Even they, at a certain point, are going to get on the phone with you, sell you on working with them, tell you that all lenders are the same so you don't shop, and then ask you for the same documents that the local guys are asking you for or the brokers are asking you for. And guess what? They're not going to do it until you've gone into underwriting, when you've likely already paid for at least a home inspection and maybe an appraisal. Why waste $800 to $1,200 potentially on that stuff? So trust but verify. Trust but verify. And you guys know this, like, you know, when, because we hear it every day. Yeah, I was working with this lender and I can't ever get him to answer my call. So I wanted to, you know, reach out to you guys because, you know, I'm going to ask you these 7 questions that this lender I've been working with for 6 months won't answer. Like, that's crap, man. Not the client, the lender. Like, do better. Like, here's a call to the industry. Do better.
Be better.
Stop going into Facebook groups and complaining about your borrowers. Oh, I just went on the soapbox here. And actually communicate with them. Hello, there's a reason why you make what you make, and it's because you're supposed to educate people, not trash them. Do better. We just have to do better as an industry. And man, this time in the market has really brought out the worst in people as far as like what they're willing to do and how deceitful they're willing to be. But I would just say trust but verify. That's my final tip. And that includes us, right? Because any advice given that doesn't include me is not good advice. So like, trust, if we tell you something, you can trust but verify, right? Not with Uncle Joe, but with an actual professional. Like talk to someone else if you think that something we're saying is off or not right. I can bring receipts. I got receipts for everything.
Get it in writing. Ask for anything on paper, or
if someone promises you a rate and you don't have it in writing, or someone promises you certain fees or a certain premium for insurance and you don't have it in writing, spoiler alert, even a lot of times when it's in writing, it's not official. Is it locked? Did they lock you at that rate? Right? Did they pull your credit when they ran that insurance quote? Like there's so much. Or, just verify that the lender that you're working with is reputable and that they have your best interest at heart. I think a lot of people just gut level, they can know that off the bat, right? And, once the lender has proven that they have your best interest at heart, follow the plan. Follow the plan, man. Follow the plan. What do you think about that, Tori?
Yeah, I'm with you. I could go on for about an hour on the deceitful lenders, like I did this morning. I think I went on a little bit of a rant about that, but yeah, get it in writing, double check everything they're telling you, and like we said, compare. If you get a quote from somebody and you're like, okay, well, I mean, that looks good, get one from somebody else. All out, and like he said, do it to us too. Just allow us to compete back is the main thing. You may end up being able to get an even better deal. So
yeah, especially right now.
Yeah.
Especially right now, everybody's competing to win. And so I'll add on top of that, Chrissy just commented that they're knee deep in it because they're getting ready to relocate to Tennessee. Chrissy, just make sure you're looking at brokers and not just like big name lenders. Brokers for sure are going to have the best rates. I mean, we see this every day. As far as terms and different things like that. And for everyone else listening, especially my first time home buyers, before I give you my little bonus opinion on something that'll be super helpful for you, communication is almost as important as affordability in this process. And so don't let someone tell you can't get both, because you can. But if you have someone that is not communicating, or they're talking down to you, or they're frustrated with you, or it takes them 3 weeks to answer your questions, leave. Don't work with them. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse as you go through the process. If they don't even communicate with you before they get your business, they're definitely not going to communicate with you afterwards.
And trust that there's somebody out there that will communicate. They're not all like that. It's not one of those things that's like, oh, I guess that's just what getting a mortgage is like. You just don't have to talk to them all the time. Wrong. You should be talking to them.
Because they're probably in some Facebook group complaining about you calling them 3 times somewhere. You won't find that with us, at least.
No.
So, like, call me. Let's talk. Let's be buds.
Let's do it.
Right? Like, this is the biggest purchase that someone is likely going to make in their entire life. I would expect you to have a few questions. I would like, if you knew what to do, then I'm out of a job. And there may be a day where that happens. It's not today. And it is a complex process, and we're basically paid to help you navigate the bureaucracy of it all, and the to make sure that you make wise choices. And so, but I'm just telling you that there's a lot of loan officers that are still hanging on, even though they treat their clients like crap. If you're working with someone like that, bounce, man. Bail out, right? Because what happens is they promise you something that sounds right on the edge of too good to be true, and then you agree to do it, and then now it's crickets every time you have to ask them, oh, where's that loan estimate? Oh, how much did you say my closing costs were again? Oh, how come I can't get that pre-approval letter? Those are giant, big, we love to talk about red flags. Those are giant red flags.
Waving in your face.
They're screaming at you like, don't get sucked into the rip current here. So, okay, my final tip, opinion, turn off the news.
That's it. End.
That's the tip.
End of show.
Right?
Bye, guys.
And I'm not even just talking about when it comes to getting a mortgage, just in general. Like, you will be much happier if you just turn off the news.
Yeah.
But specifically, you have to remember, guys, the news makes money through advertising. Fear sells. Been that way for the last 20 or 30 years, or probably forever. But I just vividly remember when there was a shift to like this 24-hour news always in your face. Things got a lot more negative. And so it doesn't have to be true for the news to say it. And a lot of people think that that's the case. It just has to make people interested. It has to be polarizing. And so take a step back, turn off the news, assess your situation, get the help of trusted professionals who can advise you on if what you're wanting to do is possible or in your best interest based on your financial goals and budget. And then take action, make a plan, right? Make a plan. So yeah. Did we answer the question? Is now a good time to buy a house? I think we did.
I think we
I'm
did
just going to
too.
say that. No one else can say otherwise because I think we did. Because the reality is it's the same in 2023 as it was in 2020, as it was in 2016, as it was in 2008. People bought houses during all those time periods, and they were all time periods of extreme volatility. 2008 was for the bad. 2016 was for the bad. Rates were nearly 5%. 2020 was great. Rates got low. People were losing their jobs, and then here we are with high rates. And so if you need a professional to help answer your questions and give you a plan, you can go to the website that you see on the screen. If you're watching, if you're listening, it's Bayou some call it hyphen, mortgage.com. There is a giant button when you get to the homepage of our website that says, see if you qualify. It's pretty self-explanatory. You click that button, you fill out some information, you can book an appointment. It'll go to Tori. Tori will do the appointment with you. And as you can tell, what we've just talked about for the last hour, we just want to help. We just want to see what your options are and help you with a game plan. So check that out. Go to bayou-mortgage.com, click the see if you qualify button on the homepage, and it will take you to a form that you can complete with some information, and it will allow you to book a call at your convenience during our slots, and we can answer these questions for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't get more simple than that. It's literally like an easy button, except unlike other lenders' easy buttons and that give you false promises, this one gives you real action.
Yeah.
So anything you want to say?
No, that's it. Just that if you're not sure, we'll figure it out. We will figure it out one way or the other, and we'll get you there. And
we'll see you again next Friday, because I think that's a good day for this.
For episode number 2.
Episode number 2. And then we have a little, I think we're going to have a partial episode or a bonus episode next week with title attorney to talk about title insurance and whatnot. So trying to put that together, but for sure, whether that happens or not, we will be back on Friday with episode 2. See you guys then.
Bye.
I'm sorry. It's like